You open your eyes, and you aren't in your bedroom. You are lying on a silk futon over fresh tatami, and the light filtered through washi paper panels paints the room in a soft gold. In the distance, the sound of bronze bells echoes through the morning. 1, 2, 3 strikes. Slow, solemn, you get up slowly. The walls are made of red lacquered wood, and the columns have lotus flower carvings. Through the window, you see a city that seems impossible. Wide avenues like stone rivers stretch in perfectly straight lines as far as the eye can see, dividing the city like a giant chessboard. Curved blue-green tile roofs multiply for miles. To the north, pine-covered mountains. In the center, rising above everything, an immense palace with blood-red gates and walls white as clouds. Figures dressed in layers of silk pass through the already busy streets, some in ox carts, others on foot carrying baskets of rice and fish. A man in simple linen clothes sweeps the stone sidewalk, humming something you don't recognize. The language you hear is strange, ancient, but fragments of it make sense to you instinctively. On the low table beside you, you find a parchment scroll. The characters are classical kanji, but you can decipher the essential words. 16th year of the reign of Kanmu, 6th month. Your stomach sinks like a stone in a river. You are in Heian-kyo, what we call Kyoto today. The year is 800 AD. The capital of Japan is only 6 years old, founded in haste by Emperor Kanmu to escape the growing power of the Buddhist temples of Nara. The avenues still smell of new wood. The foundations are still being laid, and you know that this city, beautiful and fragile as porcelain, is about to face something for which no one here has a name, because you know what is coming down the northern roads. General Sakanue no Tamuramoro's soldiers are returning from the campaigns against the Emishi, tribal peoples from the far north of Honshu. Armies of thousands of men, tired, hungry, coming from distant regions, where disease circulates unchecked, and among them, invisible, silent, a smallpox epidemic that this population's immune system has never faced head-on. The last major epidemic was in 735. 65 years ago, an entire generation was born without immunity. You know that these soldiers will reach the north gate of Heian-kyo before dawn tomorrow. The question isn't whether you could stop an epidemic alone. The question is whether you could get anyone to listen to you before it's too late. Because in Heian-kyo in the year 800, a foreigner with knowledge that no one can explain is not a sage. He is a threat. Prepare yourself. The palace bell has already rung and the day has just begun. It is 6 in the morning. There are 18 hours left before the soldiers cross the gates. First, you assess what you have. The room where you slept suggests you have some status, perhaps a traveling foreign monk, perhaps a passing scholar. The clothes folded beside you are of simple linen, but clean. You dress carefully, watching through the window as others move through the street. And here is your first brutal obstacle. Heian-kyo in 800 AD is not the Japan of the samurai you know from the movies. That universe of honorable warriors and wooden castles is centuries in the future. What exists here is a court aristocracy obsessed with a protocol hierarchy so rigid that the color of your robes can determine whether you will be received with reverence or immediately arrested by the kebishi, the urban police who patrol these avenues. The city has approximately 100,000 inhabitants distributed in a symmetrical grid of 5 kilometers by 4.5 kilometers. Modeled after the Chinese capital of Chang'an, Emperor Kanmu rules with centralized authority. The bureaucracy operates through 8 ministries and a council of state. Every person in this city has a defined place in the hierarchy, and stepping out of that place is dangerous. You have no formal documents, you have no known family, you have no clan. In a society where your identity is defined by your origin and your alliances, you are a nobody. And being a nobody in Heian-kyo is in itself suspicious, but you have an advantage that others do not. You know that smallpox kills in waves, that the virus travels through the air and through direct contact, that quarantine, isolating the sick, boiling water, and basic cleanliness can dramatically reduce mortality. The last major Japanese epidemic in 735 killed between a quarter and a third of the country's entire adult population. The four brothers of the most powerful Fujiwara clan died in that outbreak. Emperor Shomu was so disturbed by the devastation that he ordered the construction of the largest Buddhist temple in Asia in public penitence. If this repeats now in a capital still new, still fragile, the impact would be catastrophic. And you have 18 hours. It is 8 in the morning, 16 hours left. You decide you need an intermediary, someone respected, accessible, and with reasons to listen to a stranger. You head to Higashi no Ichi, the East Market, which has been buzzing with activity since dawn. Vendors of rice, dried fish, linen and silk fabrics, medicinal herbs arranged in bamboo baskets. The smell is a mixture of salt, smoke, and spices. Children run between the stalls. A woman negotiates the price of a roll of blue silk with a grave-faced merchant. And here you find what you were looking for. A Buddhist monk sitting in a corner, examining dried leaves with concentrated attention. Shaved head, saffron-colored robes. In front of him, herbs organized in small paper envelopes. A monk doctor, the closest thing to scientists this society possesses in 800 AD. You approach with a careful bow. The language you speak is the Japanese you know, but the monk frowns slightly, like someone hearing an ancient and familiar yet strange dialect. You simplify. You gesture to the north, to the city gates. You make the gesture of a sick person, fever, spots on the skin. You use the words you believe mean soldiers, disease, coming. The monk looks at you for a long moment, then he answers, slowly, like someone simplifying for a child. He says there are rumors, caravans coming from the north with sick men, fever, red spots. The gatekeepers of the North Gate sent a message to the Ministry of Popular Affairs 2 days ago. They are still waiting for a response. 2 days. The bureaucracy of Heian-kyo already knows, and it hasn't acted yet. And here is the second major obstacle. The monk believes the disease is spiritual punishment, onryo, vengeful spirits that inhabit the corrupted air. The remedy is sutras, rituals, offerings to the Hosogami, the smallpox god. Not quarantine, not physical isolation, not boiling water. You try a different approach. You ask if those who wash the bodies of the sick were the next to fall ill. If the disease followed trade routes. If the affected houses were those with the most rats. The monk frowns. He agrees thoughtfully. This, he has observed. You cannot explain viruses. You cannot talk about microscopic contagion, but you can use what he has already observed to build a logic that fits within his world. Evil spirits that travel through contact with the sick, corrupted air that spreads from one body to another, separating the affected from the healthy as a form of spiritual purification. It is a useful lie that wraps a scientific truth in language he can receive. The monk considers for a long silence. Then he says he knows someone in the Ministry of Popular Affairs, an official named Fujiwara no Uchimaro. You recognize the name Fujiwara immediately, the clan that will dominate Japanese politics for centuries. In 800, they are still consolidating power, what means they are ambitious, attentive, and interested in opportunities to demonstrate competence to the emperor. Perhaps this is your opening. It is 11 in the morning, 13 hours left. The monk leads you to the administrative offices on the east side of the palace complex. Not the palace itself, which would be impossible without formal credentials, but the external offices where petitioners with a respectable companion can be received. Fujiwara no Uchimaro is a man of 40, narrow face, indigo blue robes with pine embroidery. He receives you with the calculated courtesy of someone who is constantly assessing political utility, not sincerity. You speak, the monk translates, softening, reframing. You describe the pattern. The soldiers from the north falling ill along the road. The cycle of contagion repeating in the villages they cross. The speed at which the disease travels through military routes. You suggest concrete measures. Inspect everyone arriving through the north gate. Separate anyone with a fever or spots on their skin before they enter the city. Boil the water used in public ceremonies. Uchimaro listens. His eyes reveal nothing, then he says something that freezes you inside. Proposing restrictions on General Tamaramaro's returning soldiers would require a direct order from the emperor. Questioning the health of the imperial troops without formal recorded evidence would be interpreting negatively the victorious campaigns of Emperor Kanmu, who has just expanded imperial rule to the eastern tip of Honshu. And at a time when the court is celebrating these military victories, creating alarm about the returning soldiers is politically suicidal for any official who signs that order. You realize the abyss that exists between what you know and what this system is capable of hearing. You try a different argument. An epidemic hitting the capital would be interpreted as a sign of divine disfavor on the reign. If the emperor can prevent it, he will be remembered as a ruler blessed by the kami and the Buddhas. You are speaking the language that matters here. Not science, power and reputation, and the narrative that history will tell, Uchimaro considers. His fingers lightly touch the parchment scroll in front of him. Then he says he will consult the Minister of the Interior. Tomorrow. The word falls like a stone into a deep well. Tomorrow. It is 3 in the afternoon, 9 hours left. You already know. You aren't going to stop what is coming. The system is too big, too slow, and the court's political interests weigh infinitely more than the urgency of a stranger without formal documents and without a registered clan. So you change your objective. You spend the next few hours doing the only work within your reach. You return to the market. With the few valuables you found in the room, a lacquered wooden comb, an embroidered silk band, you trade for linen cloth, vinegar, and herbs with antimicrobial properties that the monk identifies as useful. You quickly learn that honey is abundant here, and that the monk doctors themselves already use it on wounds. You refine this practice, explain dosages, show how to use vinegar as an antiseptic, wrapped in the language of ritual purification. You go door to door in the neighborhoods of artisans and minor officials around the market, knocking, explaining with the simplest words you can assemble, gesturing. 6 soldiers arriving from the north. If someone in the family falls ill with fever and spots, isolate that room. Burn the clothes that touch the sick person. Boil the water before drinking. Do not let children near people with fevers. Some doors close before you finish the sentence. Others look at you with the expression of someone assessing whether you are crazy or a herald of bad luck, which in the mindset of this era can be the same thing. But some people listen. A female potter and her family, a carpenter who lost 3 children in the last epidemic that swept the region, a midwife who has already observed the pattern of contagion among the women she serves. Maybe 20 families, maybe 30. In a city of 100,000 people, it is a drop. But it is something. It is 2 in the morning the next day. You are at a smaller temple in the hills east of the city, Higashiyama, with the Buddhist monk who has become your only real ally in Heiankyo. He prays. You watch the distant lights of the capital flickering in the darkness like a constellation lying on the ground. And then a messenger arrives at the temple with hurried steps and a low voice. The gatekeepers of the North Gate have detained 2 soldiers. High fever, red spots on their arms and necks. The soldiers insisted they needed to enter, that they had orders to report to the barracks inside the capital. The gatekeepers, frightened by the men's appearance, refused entry, not because of sanitary protocol, which does not exist as a formal procedure here, but out of instinctive fear in the face of bodies that seemed wrong. Two men, detained by fear, not by policy. And you will never know if your conversation with Uchimaro somehow reached the ears of the guards in a distorted way, or if it was a pure human reflex in the face of the inexplicable. History's causal chains are rarely clean, but the two men are outside the walls. Tonight, at least, Heian-kyo has a barrier it didn't know it had created. In the following weeks, you witness what happens when an epidemic meets a city that doesn't know what it is. The soldiers return in groups through different roads and different gates. Some arrive already sick, others arrive healthy and fall ill days later. The court is reluctant to announce anything that could be interpreted as a sign of weakness or divine disfavor. The Ministry of Popular Affairs calls meetings. The meetings generate more meetings. Meanwhile, the disease circulates through the neighborhoods on the west side of the city, Ukiyo, where working families live in denser housing and share water wells. The mortality rate in that block reaches 20% in 1 month. The families you warned have lower mortality. You watch this with a mixture of relief and horror, because every family that survived intact is proof that the others could have survived too if someone had warned them. The Buddhist monk begins to teach the practices you shared with him, wrapped in the language of spiritual purification. He convinces the abbot of his temple to institute isolation of the sick and boiling water as practices of reverence to the Buddha. The mortality rate in the temple is dramatically lower than in the surrounding streets. Months later, Fujiwara no Uchimaro presents a modest proposal to the Council of State, a system for registering caravans arriving from provinces with reports of disease. A small, bureaucratic, imperfect, slow measure, but a seed planted within the system that moves this country. Over time, you find your role in this impossible city. You become a silent collaborator to the apothecary monk. You help refine medical treatments, document disease patterns on paper scrolls that will be copied and recopied by the region's monasteries. You never explain germs. You speak of corrupted air and impure spirits. You never speak of vaccination, a concept that would terrify anyone of this era. But you speak of strengthening the body with clean food and boiled water to resist curses. It is a constant dance between what you know and what this society can hear. You witness things of a beauty you never imagined possible. The art this period is generating, painted screens of extraordinary delicacy, poetry that describes the moon with an emotional precision that science never captured. A culture of refinement that still resonates in the Japan of today. You are seeing the foundations of one of the richest periods in human history being built live. But you also see the horrors, the rigidity of a system where a peasant's life is worth infinitely less than the protocol of a court ceremony. Children dying of infections that a simple treatment with honey and vinegar could cure, but which here are treated with sutras and bloodletting, and you can never be completely honest. You live in a permanent lie, an outsider navigating a world where a single word out of place can land you in a kebiishi cell or exiled to a northern island from which no one returns. In the end, the lesson Heian-kyo teaches you is not about medicine or science. It is about how knowledge needs cultural soil to grow. It doesn't travel in shouts. It doesn't travel through outsiders who arrive declaring they know more. It travels wrapped in the language that the listeners already understand, planted slowly, in layers, disguised as confirmation of what they already believe. You could have the medical knowledge of 2025 and still change surprisingly little in a society that lacks the concept of a germ, that attributes disease to spirits, and that punishes political alarmism with imprisonment. The distance between knowing and convincing can be greater than the distance between centuries. Here is the fact that carries the greatest weight. The smallpox epidemic of 735 killed approximately 1 million Japanese, a third of the entire population at the time. It was not inevitable. It was avoidable with basic quarantine measures. Japan had already adopted disease registration systems inspired by Tang China, but the bureaucratic system was slow, political interests were great, and no one wanted to be the official who caused panic. That didn't change in 800, it didn't change completely in 1800. And if you look honestly at the records of the 21st century, you will realize it has changed less than we like to believe. Today, the city that was born as Heian-kyo has nearly 1.5 million inhabitants. It has survived wars, earthquakes, fires, and epidemics that wiped out entire civilizations around it. It survived because each generation learned, slowly, collectively, from the dead of the previous generation. Would you have the courage to wake up in Heian-kyo in the year 800, knowing what was going to happen? To spend an entire day trying to save people who can barely understand your words within a system that has no room for what you know? Leave in the comments what you would do differently. And if this video made you reflect on the weight of knowledge and the limits of what one person alone can change, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more impossible historical journeys. Until the next video.